under bylaw number 3348, 2014. Refer to the reports and correspondence regarding the said zoning amendment bylaw. First of all, I'll ask the city planner for his report. Mr. Krekic.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the subject of the first public hearing is 1183 Ambrose Avenue, zoning amendment to approve increase in density. The property in question is located here. It's on the corner Overlook and 8th Avenue East. This report has been in front of the council in 2 previous meetings. We have completed our public notification process. We received 1 positive comment, which is included in a report. And other than that, we haven't received any other comments. Based on everything that we received, Your Worship, my recommendation remains to proceed to the 3rd reading and final adoption.
And the effect of the bylaw if adopted would be?
Immediate.
For the people watching at home, what would the rezoning result in?
The rezoning is going to result in intensification. In other words, it'll be rezoned for RM2 from R2 to RM1, and it essentially would allow more than a triplex, but the application is for a construction of a triplex, 1 additional unit.
Besides a triplex?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Krekic, were you going to read the correspondence that was received? There was 1 letter there you referenced.
Yes, Your Worship, as soon as I can find it in my binder. Rory, do you have it handy?
Perhaps while you're looking for that, Mr. Mandrick,
yes,
could
I have it. Your Worship, the response was from Jennifer, Rob, and Michael Inman, and it reads, Dear Zeno, please be advised that we are in support of the proposed zoning amendment bylaw number 3348, 2014, to permit an increase in density. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. Best regards.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mandrick, would you read the statement of procedures for the public hearing, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. A public hearing is organized according to Section 890 of the Local Government Act. Tonight's public hearing involves the zoning amendment bylaw number 3348, 2014. The intent of this bylaw is to amend the zoning bylaw number 3286, 2009 to permit increase in density. Zoning amendment bylaw number 3348, 2014 will rezone the property from R2, 2-family residential zone, to RM2, multiple family residential zone. Every person present who believes that their interest is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it is important to restrict your remarks to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. A person may make their statement in writing as outlined in the public notice, and if received by the deadline, their presentation will be read by staff at the public hearing. If a person wishes to make a presentation at the public hearing, they are welcome to do so, provided that the following criteria are followed. This is necessary in order to allow for the recording of the public hearing process. The chairperson will recognize only those individuals who present themselves at the table and speak into the microphone. Prior to speaking, please provide your full name and be prepared to spell your surname for the corporate administrator. Please also provide your residential or business address. Should you wish to read from a prepared statement, the city would appreciate receiving a copy for reference purposes by the corporate administrator. Members of council may, if they wish so, ask questions of you following your presentation. Please note that this is not a question period at which a debate takes place. City Council will not provide any comments on issues raised, but will be in attendance to listen to the comments presented. Should no additional speakers present themselves, the chair will call 3 times for anyone else to speak to the matter, and if no one else comes forward, the public hearing will be adjourned. After the public hearing has adjourned, the council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this hearing.
Thank you very much. I'll call for the first time if there's anyone who deems their property affected by the proposed rezoning to come forward to speak. I'll call for a second time if there's anyone who deems their property affected by the proposed rezoning to come forward and speak. And I'll call for a third and final time if there's anyone who wishes to come forward to speak to this matter because they deem their property may be affected by the proposed rezoning. As no one's come forward to speak, I'll declare this portion of this public hearing at an end. Next, we'll move on to the second public hearing of the evening concerning zoning amendment bylaw number 3349, 2014.
Your Worship, I have to excuse myself. This is Fisherman's Hall is involved in this, and that's my
Within the
place of
boundaries,
employment. That's
yes.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Krekic, if you'd please come forward and review your report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject of this public hearing is amendment to the Downtown Development Permit Area Design Guidelines boundary. Essentially, the area that's red and hatched, primarily along Fraser Street, to be included into development permit area, and those areas that are hatched in blue to be excluded from the development permit area. The reason for this, Your Worship, is that we're currently going through analysis of the parking requirements and existing parking in the downtown development permit area, and we've noticed that some of the areas that are hatched in blue were actually in multifamily zone, and we already have a multifamily development permit area, and we felt that by excluding those properties from the development permit area would make it more simpler for redevelopment in the future. The areas that are hatched in red for inclusion, I'm sincere when I say that that was inadvertently omitted. So that's the context of our zoning amendment. We have conducted our public information notification process, including advertising in the newspapers and delivering notices specifically to those individuals who are in the area to be included in the development permit area. Since public notification was initiated, I had 2 verbal conversations, one with the owner of 801 Fraser Street, who was in favor of this proposal, and one from 811 Fraser Street, who at the time of our communication did not commit either way, and noted that he may attend, and I indeed see that he is in the attendance tonight. One of the questions that came up during our previous meetings and in these 2 conversations was what is my benefit for being included other than having yet another set of permits on the property. And from that perspective, from the sort of realistic perspective or such, is that if in C3, if you would to change the use, those properties, none of those properties really have parking areas, and without being a development permit area, you do not have an option to pay in lieu of parking places, which happens when properties change their use. And if the use requires additional parking places, that use cannot be approved.
Mr. Krekic, if I could, currently those properties that are already built on, they are grandfathered.
They will be grandfathered, yes, Your Worship, to
So
the current
they
use.
do have some parking. It's if they change the use
Yes.
you're emphasizing. Okay.
So the study that we are doing right now, or the piece of work that we are doing right now, it's extremely late by the council direction for me to do so, is to give everybody their grandfather clause, which means that each property owner in downtown development permit area will receive a statement of the grandfather number of parking places. Majority do not have any parking places. Some have a few, but everybody will be grandfathered to the number of the use that was actually in place as of 2009 when the bylaw was adopted.
Thank you. So nobody asked for that and you didn't provide it?
In the conversation, I wasn't asked for that number, but everybody will get it in a matter of next 4 to 6 weeks. I also had one written communication, Your Worship, and that was earlier today, and I didn't have a chance to include it in your packages. It was from the Fisherman's Hall, and I can read it to you.
Please do.
These were questions and my answers to Fisherman's Hall. Will there be any impact on our taxes? The answer is no. What does the development permit area require us to do? Downtown design guidelines will apply. And as a consequence of that, changes to the exterior envelope of the building requires a development permit application. I noticed that the park area at the corner of Fraser Street is not included. The answer is the area being Zone P is not expected to be developed. At some point in time, when funds are available, there are things that design guidelines ask from public spaces. So we do have notes in our design guidelines about beautification of public spaces, but I think it's fairly clear that these days some of those aesthetic works are not reasonable to be done. The next question is, will the city maintain the park and vacant lots next to our property? The answer is this is something that DPA does not address. This can be addressed by engineering and public works. The next question is, we believe that our property and the rest of South Fraser Street was not missed when DPA was adopted in 2009. We believe it was deliberately excluded. Why the change now? I'm repeating myself. Not sure really how I can prove to everybody, but it was inadvertent. Are there streets and sidewalks? Are the streets and sidewalks going to be brought up to the same standards as those already in the DPA? And the answer is that this really depends on availability of funds. That's the extent of the communications with the Fisherman's Hall, Your Worship.
Fraser Street was on the list to have the road redone there. I think it was subsequently deleted because of tight money at that time.
Yeah.
So for the people that are watching at home, Mr. Krekic, the reason we have established a development permit area, could you outline those reasons?
The reason for establishing design guidelines for development permit area was something that was thought long and hard about. When I started the process, I understood that we have the support to proceed along the lines of trying to improve the aesthetics of the downtown. We have the benefit of Cow Bay, which since 1995 has been a development permit area and has proven that it is a beneficial type of enhancement on top of zoning. And we believe that the design guidelines for downtown are of a similar nature, and they are very slowly starting to show their benefits. Some of the new buildings are very much within a context of what we're trying to do. One of the biggest things that I deal with on a continuous basis would be things like signage, which is a fairly important element of our design guidelines. And lately, we had a number of changes in land use where we have to deal with this parking situations in terms of change in use and if it's increased. And we did have some maybe 3 or 4 situations where we will be issuing pay in lieu invoices for $200 per parking spot.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
I just had one question. I was asked about the whole grandfathering issue, and the question was twofold. One, if they sell the property to somebody else for the same use, does it then come under the development permit area, or if it changes use, and how does that affect parking? So I said that I would ask those questions.
So the first question was if somebody sells the property, does the parking remain grandfathered? Yes. We are dealing with the properties and the current owner, and that stays with the property itself. And the second question was?
So I guess, so if they sell the property and does it then, it falls under the development permit area, and that's where the confusion is, because they're not sure when the new parking, I guess, requirements would come into play.
So the parking requirements have been established in 2009 in a zoning bylaw. So we have in Schedule 10 or Section 10, we have parking requirements for a variety of the uses. That remains there. And so change in use since 2009 carries this conversation about, and probably the best example is if say a store changes to restaurant. The restaurant parking requirements are much greater and then the store requirements. So that would require essentially buying pay in lieu of parking. But one thing that also has to be understood is that the pay in lieu is not a penalty. The pay in lieu is an opportunity. And we're going to have a conversation about the value of pay in lieu, because the intent of pay in lieu is for us to build up a kitty to build parking places. And so we functionally cannot build a kiddie at $200 per parking lot, and I can tell you without blushing that it's going to be at least $5,000 to construct a parking lot it's going to cost a minimum $5,000 to have a surface parking space. So if you have a 50 parking places, it would be 50 times $5,000 to build it. So somehow we have to get in a balance as our community is increasing in population, and the busyness of 2nd and 3rd Avenue are increasing, and Fraser Street likewise, is how are we going to manage our parking requirements in the future, because we are very much squeezed for the area.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, I asked about the grandfathering several times before, Zeno. So what I'm getting at now is there's going to be no additional cost to the people living in those places or carrying out business with this new bylaw. Everything will be grandfathered in, and I'm looking not only at parking, but existing building permits that are going on right now, signage and other things. Everything will just remain status quo, or are you going to be starting to look at making changes that are going to cost these people in these buildings money?
The only change that this will bring about is that once it falls under the development permit area, for example, you will need to have a development permit application in order to put a new sign, in order to change your siding, in order to do anything on the outside of the envelope. The cost of the development permit area for minor works is $60. That's the works below $5,000. The cost of the development permit, anything over $5,000, is $235 plus $10 for each PID, meaning that's wrong now. I think it's gone up to $15. And we are just essentially just recouping the cost of the length of title search, which the applicant can do themselves at the at the government agent's office. And anything that's below $100,000, council has given me authority to deal with it at my desk. Anything that's over $100,000 comes to the council for approval. In terms of the grandfathering of the parking places, that's all in place. Anybody has a building permit in place, it's going to be in place. In other words, if somebody has their building halfway through being constructed, or they've taken a building permit already, I'm not going to go backwards. But from here on, those will be requirements which, in general, I believe are the reasonable requirements.
Thank you. You got anything further there, Mr. Craig?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Mandrick, would you please read the statement of public hearing process?
Thank you, Your Worship. A public hearing is organized according to Section 890 of the Local Government Act. Tonight's public hearing involves the Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3349/2014. The intent of this bylaw is to amend the Zoning Bylaw number 3286/2009 to permit an adjustment to the downtown development permit area and include several properties that were missed when the DPA was adopted in 2009 and exclude some downtown properties that are zoned for residential use. Every person present who believes that their interest is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it is important to restrict your comments and remarks to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. A person may make their statement in writing as outlined in the public notice, and if received by the deadline, their presentation will be read by staff at the public hearing. If a person wishes to make a presentation at the public hearing, they are welcome to do so, provided that the following criteria are followed. This is necessary in order to allow for the recording of the public hearing process. The chairperson will recognize only those individuals who present themselves at the table and speak into the microphone. Prior to speaking, please provide your full name and be prepared to spell your surname for the corporate administrator. Please also provide your residential or business address. Should you wish to read from a prepared statement, the city would appreciate receiving a copy for reference purposes by the corporate administrator. Members of council may, if they wish so, ask questions of you following your presentation. Please note that this is not a question period at which a debate takes place. City Council will not provide any comments on issues raised, but will be in attendance to listen to the comments presented. Should no additional speakers present themselves, the chair will call 3 times for anyone else to speak to the matter, and if no one else comes forward, the public hearing will be adjourned. After the public hearing has adjourned, the council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this hearing.
Thank you very much. I'll call now for anybody who's in the public gallery who wishes to come forward, who deems their property affected by the proposed rezoning to come forward. Mr. West, if you'd like to come forward, sir, make yourself comfortable in the chair there, and when you're ready to speak, you press the grayish-green button, and you'll be on. Good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is James West. That's W-E-S-T. I own, or my company, Jim West Signs Limited, owns 811 Fraser Street. I put that building up in 1979, and I have lived there since 1979. In order for me to have put a residence above my sign shop, it was necessary in those days to provide some off-street parking. And I have room for 2 vehicles inside the sign shop, and quite often on weekends and particularly days like Halloween, I put both of our vehicles inside the sign shop. So I do have off-street parking, although my vehicle is parked on the street most of the time. I am just trying to address the south side of Fraser Street from the native church to the stairs on Borden. That is my concern. I can see absolutely no benefits to this amendment for myself personally, and I would like to go on record as being against this amendment. I I was told that this will probably increase the value of my property. Now that doesn't specifically concern me because my property is not up for sale. But if your property increases, it's going to be reassessed, and I'm going to be paying more taxes, more city municipal taxes on that property. And I consider that I pay enough already. Now, I can't see any reason to fix it. If it works, if something works, why would you fix it? The line has been down the middle of the street. I don't believe back in history that we were accidentally left off of that development area. I think there was a specific reason. I don't know because I'd have to go back into the history of the archives here. As far as I can see, I am just going to be forced to adhere to unnecessary regulations. And I'm not quite sure what those are going to be. I've talked to the people on the street, not everybody, and I'm wondering why this has come about now. Is this because of Kevin Newton's project next door to me that used to be the U-Brew? I'm told that he doesn't have enough parking spaces for his new project there. Now, when it was a U-Brew, people came and brewed there all the time, and I let them park in front of my shop. We get along fine. We've never had a problem of parking on Fraser Street. Back in the 70s, we did a study, and I told the city we all get along fine. And I was told that the city had received some complaints about Mark Rutherham having too much equipment parked on the streets. Mark Rutherham owns, the old Jescan building, which is on the other side. It's in the development area, and the building where Intertech is there now. He employs a humongous amount of people, and he has a lot of equipment. It's never been a problem to me on that street. Mark has never ever been a problem, and I've no idea why anybody would complain. The only time we have a temporary parking problem is with the dance studio, when all the parents come to drop their children off. You want the kids to get out of the car and safely get into the dance studio and back. And that, like, people don't park there for any more than a minute and a half. They drop the kids off and then they come and pick them back up. I can just see me being forced to adhere to unnecessary regulations. It's going to cost me down the road. And I don't think it needs fixing. That's my opinion, Your Worship.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. West. Let's see if there's any questions from members of council here. Councillor Garon.
Thank you, Mr. West. I don't really have any questions, but I do know when we were looking at rezoning the downtown area to a downtown development permit area, we wanted all the businesses to be on the same playing field, and I don't know how somebody must have just drawn the line in the wrong place at some point in time. I'm not sure what happened there, but it was to put everybody on a fair and even playing field, all the businesses downtown. That was my recollection of why that was all came about.
Councillor Ashley.
Thank you for coming forward with your concerns. I have a question for Mr. Krekik first, because I just want to consolidate it in my mind. So I can hear that one concern that you have is it doesn't seem to be a parking problem. So it almost seems that there's a feeling that the development permit area has been put forward to address parking. Is that, and I guess the question first would be for you, is that what you're thinking?
That's the feeling I get, yeah.
Okay, so and
more restrictions on things like signage also.
Okay, so my question to Mr. Krekik would be, and I'm just trying to get my understanding of the grandfathering, with putting in the development permit area, I'd like to address that section of the road. first of all, with parking, will it affect any of the current parking requirements of the businesses in those areas? In other words, the ones that would be grandfathered, would they have any additional parking requirements or costs to them as a result of being part of the development permit area?
The answer is no. And just for clarification purposes, that's going to be the number that's going to be given to you, that for the use that you have now, you now have X number of parking places. No cost, no nothing, no difference. The future uses then become something to be considered. If a future use requires a one extra parking lot, the current C3 zone does not have. The only way that you can buy pay in lieu parking is by being in development permit area.
Okay, so based on that, then the only way that Mr. West or any other business along that area would have to pay additional would be if they either changed their use or sold it to someone else that changed the use. Is that correct, or am I off?
Your use has to remain exactly the same. You cannot change the use to a higher use. So I use the example of changing the use from a store to a restaurant, and I'm not going to start making permutations from Mr. West's store. But if he sells the property or he decides to put a different use that requires additional parking, that would not be possible.
So he would have to apply for that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. He would have to stay as is. So that means that's going to be a sign store, an apartment for as long as it exists.
Oh, I see. So you're saying that if it changed use, it would have to change the zoning. Okay. And then I guess my other question, I guess this would be for you as well, Mr. Krekic, is I do recall what Councillor Garon said about like wanting everybody to be on the same playing field, but I also remember, and it kind of came over a series of things, and I think even the council before I got on was talking about this, was about having a vision for kind of downtown and how things looked. And I know it's been a slow process of trying to get everything looking a little bit nicer and more uniform, but I thought that was one of the main purposes of having that development permit area, was so that when people did things like signage or putting siding on or painting and that sort of thing, that it kind of fell into a certain guideline. Is that correct?
That is the primary reason for development permit area design guidelines, Councillor Ashley.
Last question then, just to clarify. So at this point then, I mean, it seems like the parking wouldn't be affected, but if, let's say, they wanted to do some improvements to the outside of their building, like putting new signage up or painting or those sorts of things, they would have to apply for a development permit, and that would cost, according to what you said, about them, depending on the amount. So $60 under, $5,000, that sort of thing. Okay, thank you.
Your Worship, I would change my mind if you promise me to come and fix up Fraser Street as was promised before the college was built. We were supposedly going to get improvements. We have broken lines there all the time. It's cost the city a lot of money. It's very old infrastructure, as you know, but unfortunately, the city doesn't have the budget. I would change my mind if you promised to come and repave, take that speed bump away from in front behind Overweighty there, which I actually painted yellow one afternoon to try and slow people down. That's the only way I would change my mind, Your Worship.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. West. How about a promise for a promise? If you promise that I can get re-elected, I will promise you that Fraser Street will be given due and fair consideration in next year's budget. How's that sound?
I can promise you you'll get re-elected. You certainly have my vote.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate you coming forward with your comments, and we understand, and I'm certainly aware of the needs on Fraser Street and the state of the infrastructure, which was one of the reasons why we had it on the list this year. It's unfortunate we had to take it off, but I'm sure it's on the list next year because it needs to be done. A work crew can only go in there so many times in a year to fix things before you're at a complete loss. So we understand. But thank you for your comments. Thank you for coming here. Let's just wait and see. I think a couple other council members, starting with Councillor Garon, then Councillor Cunningham, and then Councillor Kinney may have some questions. Please go ahead, councillors.
I don't think I really have anything else to say. I think Councillor Ashley kind of covered most of the
Okay.
things I was going.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham?
Two things. So Kevin Newton's new project, I don't even know what it is grandfathered for parking and everything then?
Oh, that's me. That's
Mr. Krekic.
that project is coincidental. We actually started our process of amendment prior to him telling me about his project.
So he is now going to have to pay for parking.
If he wants to do what he's proposing, he will have to be in development permit area in order to be able to pay for the parking. If this doesn't pass, then he is going to be short on parking based on what I understand. But I only have a short story for Mr. Newton, meaning I do not have the drawings, I do not have the specifics of the project, nor the exactness of the uses. From the general conversation I had with him, he would require more parking places than what he will be grandfathered for, keeping in mind that he actually doesn't have any off-street parking in that building.
Thank you.
Okay, now the other question is, I notice here on C1 on McBride Street, is that areas excluded that are now going to be included into the boundary?
So on McBride Street, they're all hatched in blue. And essentially what, so the way that the lines were drawn, and I think that Councillor Garon kind of said it best, the way that the lines were drawn would have paid more attention if we were a little bit more detailed with it. And so we included some areas that were behind the frontage on McBride, and some areas that actually do not have any buildings in there. So we just adjusted it to exclude the blue hatched areas.
So they're no longer in the downtown permit area.
The blue hatched areas are no longer. The blue hatched areas are no longer in a downtown development permit area.
Those are the ones that parallel McBride Street. Yeah. Councillor Kinney, you had a comment or a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Grecki, did you not say that there would be no tax increase?
This doesn't carry a tax increase. I think the conversation about, in my opinion, development permit area design guidelines will improve the value of the properties in the long run. As at present time, when this changes, it does not have any effect on taxes. In fact, taxes are not set by development permit area, they're set by assessments.
Thank you very much, Mr. West. Is there anybody else this evening who wishes to come forward who deems their property could be affected by the proposed rezoning? If you'd wish to come forward. Mrs. Nelson, good evening. Certainly. Mr. Marco, if you'd come forward, please. Thank you. Mrs. Nelson has a memory stick there. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Christina Nelson, and I work at the Fisherman's Hall. And so I'm here tonight because we have some concerns about the rezoning as well. I brought some photographs, and this is not to show you Joy's dog, but this is beside the Fisherman's Hall. We have this what is deemed a park area that, as you can see, is like a jungle and is certainly not. It hasn't been looked after through the city. Here it is again along the side, and it runs along the sidewalk there, and that's what you call up to Dead Man's Bluff. And the next picture is just another one to show the overgrowth that's there on a permanent basis. And so, of course, one of our big concerns was whether we were going to incur any extra expenses, and we've understand that about the taxes, but we will have to follow the downtown design guidelines, so that certainly could be extra money and having these development permits. So what we have on the next picture is, in the winter time, this is what we have on Fraser Street. So these are the standards that we get. We shovel the snow. That's the property line where that telephone pole is. So we shovel the snow off the sidewalk to the other way. Then the plow comes, and then we have to shovel out so anyone can come near our building to park. We have lots of elderly people. We have the Unemployed Action Center. So you have a lot of people who are elderly and disabled in and out of our building. And we're having to make cow paths through the snow on a regular basis. So to us, we'd be very opposed to having a rezoning if this is the standard that we have to live with the snow removal in the winter, the jungle beside the hall through the rest of the year. And as you know, when you get down Fraser Street, there are no banners, no beautiful banners. There's no flower boxes. There's no hanging baskets. It certainly seems it's off the grid. And I'm under the impression as well that, it probably wasn't. I think it might have been deliberately excluded as well, because there's just really nothing we just can't compare ourselves with the downtown area. So that's our concerns, is if this is the standards that we will live with, then we're certainly opposed. And so we haven't ever had that addressed. So that is mostly our concerns with the rezoning. Is in order to we would have to be treated the same as the other businesses on 3rd and 2nd Avenue, which you don't see this go on. So that is our main concern.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other concerns?
No, but I have something that's unrelated to this. Am I able to bring that up, or would I have to wait until?
We have to stick specifically to
Okay.
this. However, when we adjourn the public hearing and we get into the regular council meeting tonight, the council then convenes to a committee of the
Okay.
whole,
Oh,
and there is a public portion where you can certainly come and ask questions about the city's operation. But
okay.
if you'd stay there, Mrs. Nelson, we'll see if members of council have any questions for you. Councillor Cunningham.
Fisherman's Hall is a nonprofit organization, right? So any expenses incurred because of a rezoning would be a hardship to you, would they not? Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Ashley.
Just a question, because I don't know about if there's other nonprofits that are currently within the development permit area. Is there anything in our bylaw or anything that would allow for some sort of consideration of that?
There are other nonprofits in the area. There is Salvation Army. There is a senior citizen center. There is a across the street what used to be called Fairview Management. CIS. There are a number of nonprofits in the area, and no, we do not. Zoning does not provide any provisions for relaxation of the requirements. It's unlike the taxes requirements.
Yes, please go ahead.
Just more specifically, though, I'm wondering, like, I understand that there's some that are in that area that we're proposing to add, but what you're saying then is in our current, because we haven't done this yet, in our current development permit area, any nonprofits don't get any consideration.
Everybody's from the principle that we wanted to bring the downtown and everybody in the downtown to the same platform, and from that point on to try to improve the aesthetics. I think we're kind of missing the point here. We're talking about one element. I think the whole point of downtown development permit area is to increase the aesthetics of the downtown area. That is the principle, and everybody to be on the same benchmark. And so we do not discriminate nonprofits or for-profit organizations.
Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, no, I wasn't necessarily meaning that, they wouldn't have to follow development permit area guidelines, but more so that we might have something, and I understand we don't, but that we might have something where they would have less of a fee or some sort of recognition that they're nonprofit, but I'm guessing that we don't.
I would acquiesce that to administration. In our fee schedule, we charge everybody same fee for the applications. I'm not sure if there's an option for changing that.
that would certainly be something that could be determined next time we review the fees. We could have a differentiation.
The only assistance at this time is through the Community Enhancement Grant Program, I believe. Councillor Cunningham, you had a question?
Yeah. Looking at that side of the street, you have quite a few non-profit organizations. Just about, I would say, half of that side of the street is non-profit. So that would have a bearing on this rezoning as far as I'm concerned, unless we either looked at another bylaw or another resolution to enhance any development they want to do or that, because this is going to definitely, these nonprofit organizations do a lot in the city, and they also at the same time come under the gun for funding and that, and it's going to be a hardship. I know the Fisherman's Hall is looking at re-roofing and a bunch of other exterior work, and that's in the next year or two, and right there you're adding to the costs of any development or renovations on these buildings.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Nelson. Appreciate you coming down here this evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to voice our concerns.
I'll ask again to anybody in the public gallery, if you feel your property is deemed affected by this proposed change, to come forward and speak. Good evening, Mr. Golden.
I'll ask first. It is a zoning.
How about your name and address
Mr.
for the
Golden.
record, please?
Mr. Golden, 1601 2nd Avenue West.
Thank you.
I want to change a little bit, because you're not only talking about adding properties, you're talking about excluding properties, which hasn't come up in your discussion. So I'd like to ask, what was the criteria for excluding, but secondly, because I find other places.
Let's do this one question at a time.
Okay, thank
you. Mr. Krekic, please, in answer to the question.
There were two criteria for excluding, primarily along McBride Street. First criteria was that there were properties that were stacked behind McBride Street that did not have the influence in a visual corridor that we were trying to protect. And on the multifamily development area that's on the to the west side, that those areas are also under the multifamily development design guidelines. And we felt, and I am recommending, that we should not have two development permit areas on one property.
So overlapping legislation. Your next question, Mr. Golden.
But many of them that weren't excluded are multifamily dwellings right across the street from the ones on 3rd Avenue. I don't understand what he's saying.
Mr. Krekic?
Do you have the map that's included with zoning bylaw? Can you point to me where there are ones that we did not include, that the multifamily not excluded? Mr. Golden, please. I'll help you.
Okay, if you could put the mic on, Mr. Golden, people who are watching by television can hear you.
Okay, my glasses aren't that good. So right beside on McBride Street, there's the present store, but there's two or three houses beside it which weren't excluded, which are multifamily dwellings. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Are you talking
an apartment?
Are you talking behind Saanich Plumbing and Heating? Whereabouts are you talking? Councillor Cunningham.
I think what Larry's talking about, first of all, you've got Ferguson's, you've got multiple dwellings up there. You go a little farther down, you've got the apartment block next to Spiro's. You got a residential area above Spiro's. Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Golden?
Yeah, that's far and beyond the boundary.
But right across from the excluded area, you do have Ferguson's.
Go to the corner of McBride and 2nd. So if you're at the corner of the McBride and 2nd, that store is right there, which is
the liquor store, McBride and 2nd.
No, across the street, so it's been included. So that was the you do a catalog.
Are you talking the
you
old,
do a catalog.
Are you talking the old swimming pool?
You do a catalog. McBride in second. Oh, excuse me. Park Avenue in second. Excuse me.
Okay.
Oh, jumped. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Krekic.
I think you have to look at the zoning, Mr. Golden, rather than what you think the property is used for, because that entire area that you're describing is zoned as C1. So it's not we are excluding multifamily as zone, not multifamily as projects.
Okay.
There are many residential properties inside C1.
Okay, I'll get to my regular question. If you were a single family dwelling, which is included in this area, do you have to give a development permit?
Yes.
Okay, if you're going to change your use from so with the idea of densification, if you're going to make a duplex out of a single home, you're going to have to get an extra parking space. Can you get it for $200 now that you're in the DPA?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward who deems their property affected by this proposed rezoning to come forward? Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward to speak? Is there anyone else, again, for the third and final time, who wishes to come forward to speak as they deem their property affected by the proposed rezoning? Thank you. We'll declare the public hearing at an end. I'll ask council to move on to the regular meeting agenda. Mr. Mandrick, is Councillor Thorkelson there? Could you check the administration office, please? So we'll call the regular meeting of council to order for Monday, July 28th, 2014. The first recommendation is that the regular meeting be suspended and the committee of the whole meeting be convened. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. I'll refer council to the committee of the whole. I'll ask council for a motion. Thank you, Councillor Kinney. Recommendation that the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting of July 28th, 2014 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. It's adopted. There are no petitions and delegations tonight, so we're next on the agenda is question period from the public. If there's any members of the public here this evening who wish to come forward to ask questions about the city's operation, you're welcome to do that at this time. Mrs. Nelson, would you like to come forward, please? Good evening again.
Good evening. Your Worship, I'm going to leave for a few minutes.
Certainly. Mr. Mandrick, please show for the record in the minutes Councillor Thorkelson is leaving the meeting for a second time this evening.
Okay. Yes, let me short. The Fisherman's Hall, as we've already just mentioned, is a not-for-profit, and the Fisherman's Hall requires a new roof, and we have a $90,000 bill that we're looking at to put a roof on our hall. So of course we are in the process of applying for a gaming license in order to raise funds, and the Fisherman's Hall has been quite a community institution since 1967. Many community events have been held at the Fisherman's Hall and are still being held at the Fisherman's Hall. And what I would like to request, if possible, if council would be willing to write a letter of support that recognizes the importance of the Fisherman's Hall to the community in Prince Rupert. That's what I'm requesting, which would go with our gaming application to provide the there's community benefits when you're putting into a gaming license. So I'm just asking a request of.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Just for the people that are watching at home, many of us are aware of the different events that are held there, but if you'd like to give some examples of how the place is utilized, certainly by the community, not only the meeting rooms, but the general assembly area and the various events that have been held over the years.
That we have, of course, there are certainly rentals, and many people have been, married. We hold a lot of meetings there. We go on a below market rent is what we rent at. We have reduced rates for memorials. We, we have AA meets there. We always will have events, Take Back the Night. Those are all free of charge to come to the Fisherman's Hall. So there's various, dancing. We, provide the hall for that. We try as best we can to make sure that the doors are open for people who come off the street as well. Even so far as people need sometimes just to get out of the wet and cold, and they're certainly welcome to come to the Fisherman's Hall, and we try to see if they need something to eat. So what is happening? We have an advocate there, which is the Unemployed Action Center. So we see many, many marginalized people through our hall, and it sort of is the hub for that sort of activity. And I think that, the community knows that. So there are there certainly are rentals, but every time that we have the opportunity to provide our hall free of charge, we certainly try to do that in order to help individuals and various groups. It's quite a busy place, and we would really like to be able to be successful in getting that license and
Certainly.
get that roof on there.
Thank
So
you very
thank
much.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Oh, I should.
Is there anyone else this evening who wishes to come forward to ask any questions regarding the city's operation?
Thank you. I'm afraid. There. Thank you. There we go.
I'll ask council if they wish to, as there's no further questions from the public, adjourn and reconvene to a regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Is there any discussion? Questions called. Those in favor? Thank you. We'll go back to the regular meeting of council this evening. The first item for the council's consideration is a recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of July 28th, 2014 be adopted as circulated. Thank you. Is
Your
there a
Worship.
second?
Excuse me, there is one slight change to the agenda as outlined.
And that would be
to
item E before item D under item 6, reports and recommendations?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's been moved to adopt the agenda. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Is there any discussion, any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Now we'll try the right wording for errors and omissions on the next recommendation. And that would be that the minutes of the special council meeting of July 7th, 2014 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. The second set of minutes are the minutes from the regular council meeting of July 7th, 2014. The recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are also adopted. We'll move down to petitions and delegations. There's a presentation from Mr. Krekic, the city planner, and this is regarding the city land base indicator inventory. Good evening again, Mr. Krekic, Mr. Lapointe,
Your Worship.
and Mr. Thurston.
So with me, I have on my left-hand side, Mr. Robin Lapointe. He is on a project team dealing with the overall aspect of planning for major projects. And on my right, I have Mr. Ian Hurston, who is also a very instrumental member of our work, and he will be helping us with the slideshow. So if you can start the slideshow, Ian, that'd be great. Last week, Your Worship, I presented the piece of work that we referred to as housing inventory and survey. Today, I will be talking about land-based indicator, taking stock of opportunities and demand. This is very much work in progress that I promised to bring to you at the last meeting. Next slide. This is just a lay of the land very quickly, you know, the summary of our presentation. Next slide. So this piece of work, land-based indicators, resulted from a number of staff meetings and involvements. Since about a year ago, we have been working on this sort of method of planning for major projects, and these are the things that we identified as very important to consider during possible major project development, things that we need to understand, measure, plan for, in order not to have them disturbed to the point of disturbing the entire community. So we have population. Last week we presented housing. This week we're talking about land base, and then we have infrastructure, social capital, tax base, local commerce, and education. And really, in order for us to do adequate plan and health, and in order for us to do adequate work on planning for how major projects may affect us, these need to be all looked at in a similar way by measuring first and then understanding and then planning for the influences. Next slide, please. This is what, why we are planning for major projects. Maybe I'll have Mr. Lapointe talk on this slide.
Good evening. As this project is all about foresight, Zeno asked if I would share some of our hindsight that we've experienced in Kitimat with the major projects. And there's two major ways of defining a major project. One, of course, is by the dollar value, how many billions, which, by the way, is 1,000 millions. They're very large projects. Or the other is by the size of the camp. And I feel it's the camp that will impact the community. The size of the camp will impact the shadow population. And the shadow population, if someone had told me 4 or 5 years ago that it was that large, I would have questioned it. But just to give you some examples in Kitimat, I'm not here, what does this work right here? I'm not here to talk about the numbers, it's more the shape of the curve. Yeah, no, I had it there, Ian. It's right here. More the shape of the curve, because this curve is made up of two parts. One is the construction camp, which is extremely well defined by the project. It's the shadow population that comes with that curve. In Kitimat's case, it wasn't that long ago where we were, probably had the highest vacancy rate in Canada, and there was numbers as such as 40%. Well, when the project was announced, or notice to proceed was given on December 1st, 2011, it was amazing how quick that vacancy was consumed. And just from my definition, owning a small engineering firm, which we've hired a number of employees, my definition of vacancy would be accommodations that we would house one of our employees or that I would stay at. I would say by the middle of 2013, though, that housing accommodation was consumed. And so when in the case of our business, hiring somebody, the challenge was not finding the capable people, the challenge was finding the accommodations for them. So I would say from December 1st of 2011 to the middle of 2013, we'd consumed that vacancy rate. So being at this side of the curve, everybody anticipates the curve, and I think what's most important is where you're going to end up over here. So the reason for sharing this curve with you is you're at this stage here. There's things that you can do that can impact or improve where you end up after the curve. But this shadow population, just to briefly, it is a number of construction firms have moved to the community. The owners and the superintendents do not stay in the camp. They end up staying within the community, the project management team, any staff that the local government hires, any staff that the engineering firms hire. And what that number is, I cannot tell you, but I can tell you the impact has been substantial. And it's something that I suggest the city of Prince Rupert consider. So I'll turn it back to Zeno.
So we're still ahead of that curve. And we still have a chance to be proactive, and I think I'm very much passionate about suggesting that we should be proactive, because it's fairly easy to be reactive. Next slide. So getting started in January 2014, Council made planning one of their major planning for major projects one of the top priorities. This legitimized much of the work already done by staff and then energized it by support, and following waiting a period to secure grant, which by the way we still don't have from the province. The work renewed with the June 24-25 project team workshop. This is mostly and very much I think I have to say very much supported by CAO, Mr. Long, who has given me authority to proceed to work, because if we don't finish this thing in time, we're already starting to get behind the curve. I was ready to start this work a year ago, and it's really frustrating that we couldn't get out of the blocks earlier and to be demanded to produce right now. So sample analysis, this is something that that I promised I was going to bring to you at the conclusion of the last meeting where we talked about vacant lots. So we're going to proceed quickly through these slides. So from the housing indicator to land base, last time I showed you the vacant lots and a number of vacant lots. Now we can break it down. We can tell you more details on that. So next slide. We can tell you which are municipal lots. We can tell you which are provincial lots, and we can tell you which are fee simple lots, so privately owned lots. Next slide. We can also tell you that 209 are municipal lots. Now, these are 25-foot lots. Some could be 50-foot lots. We didn't get into that analysis. And 299 are private lots. And over the period of time, we will also be looking at the reality of those lots being built upon. We can also tell you that in which part of our zoning they fit in, and so on the next slide you will see the majority of the vacant lots are actually in residential zones. So it's a very good mix. Next slide. We can also show you that this is all now coming from the GIS platform that we are borrowing from Urban Systems. We can see that they are all serviced. Ian has already gone to the next line. So at this point in time, what we are expanding our work, and I alluded to that fact at the last council meeting. So we have vacant lots. Those are lots that are easily accessible, or they're accessible, and they have services right off the street. So go ahead. Next slide. Those are what we call infill lots. The next component of our residential analysis is perimeter lots. And so they are in blue. Those will be the lots that are near services and they have higher potential of being developed. And then we have greenfield, which is substantial investment and work on servicing. Now we're going to come back, and that was just a sort of a teaser as to where we are working on land-based indicator evaluation matrix. So in our workshop that I mentioned earlier, the two big pieces of work is to identify our evaluation criteria. So these are the 10-11 items that we're going to be putting every potential area through PACES section 40 EMA. That's brownfields. I'm so glad that Robin is so very fluent in brownfields. Now he understands all about brownfields from experience in Kitimat. Then we have site characteristics and access. That's easily explainable. Availability of municipal services. land use regulations, OCP, land ownership, legal review of covenants, the areas that have covenants upon them, topographic, geotechnical information, environmental sensitivity, parcel size, local expertise, and planning principles. And so those are the primary criteria that we're going to take all of the areas that we are looking through PACES. And the areas that we are looking, the scope of work includes residential. So we are, these are the things that we have isolated through conversations and through our experiences in City Hall. That there's a demand for camps. There's going to be increasing demand for single-family homes, and there's going to be increased demand for apartments. And on the industrial, we have light industrial. That would be, your typical things like in our light industrial area, the shops, the car sales, the things of that nature. And then we have this section that's called laydown areas, which are the areas that are large areas where companies will stage their supplies. And so, again, we have to refer to Kitimat. Both Robin and I reside in Kitimat, so it's easy to make that connection. But there are places that they will store concrete, precast concrete. That's acres and acres of precast concrete, and that's kind of put there for a little while and moved away until the next piece comes in. So this is a very important part of our work, and so everything that we do is going to be put through these spaces. Next slide. What are we aiming to do? We are aiming to equip the city with a basic information into GIS. So GIS is a Geographic Information Systems. It's a techie word that gives you a very powerful tool where you can manage your drawings and your data, right, Ian? Good. Ian is a guru as far as I'm concerned on GIS, but I sound really good, don't I? To translate as much data as we can into GIS platform. We have a lot of data, and so translating into GIS, that's time consuming, and we're going to try to do as much as we can through this project. Then we want to assess opportunities for future residential and industrial development, as mentioned earlier. And really there are two main points: is to conduct structured analysis is something that we need to do, because we all have opinions, but this is going to be structured analysis. And to balance expectations and means. We are not very rich, so I'm working on a very modest budget, and I have great expectations to perform. Next study. Defining study area is what we are now still working on. Next slide. So these are just sort of the sort of reiteration of drawings that I'm going to shorten up. And so here we have two primary areas that we want to concentrate on. So that will be essentially the footprint and the nearby areas. The reason there's a blurb on the bottom is to capture the industrial area which is not essentially in the original footprint of the community, slightly outside. And then we also want to go back, and also we want to look at the Ridley Island Road and expand on that's where it appears to be that we already have put our finger on our sights on industrial development. Next slide. So now narrowing the search. So, just a progression of slides. This is the entire community minus lot 444. We are looking at a variety of these overlaying different information, including services. This is supposed to impress you how this looks, but now it looks a bit like a blob. Stay here for a second. And so this afternoon, I actually understood it was me, not we, decided on this one area to be our first area of evaluation, because we had a difference of opinion. Again, that's a sort of dynamics of a project team. How come you didn't look at another location? But we had to start somewhere. So this is what I call Shawatlands Road area. Next slide. And so this is the area that we are now looking at, and essentially there's a residential component in here, and there's an industrial component down here. And so the next slide. So now we're starting to put this area and information through PACES. I looked at the zoning. It includes both land uses in demand, industrial and residential. Ownership, city and province own it. But we do have, can you back to the other slide? We do have restricted covenants on a portion that's down here and on this portion that's here. And the restricted covenants date back to 1911, Chapter 30. Go forward. Chapter 30 covenant, and to free up those areas, discussion has to be about asking the province to remove the covenant, which essentially says for the purposes of public use and essentially for the public use. And I think the other part is that I think this kind of gives us an opportunity to apply for Crown grant for the lands that province owns that are part and parcel of this specific area. On Section 40, which is brownfields or contaminated site legislation, we know that we have two sites. One is the old car dump, and the other one is the incinerator. And we know that we will need stage 1 for all and stage 2 for the two known areas to be conducted, which we will not be able to do right now. So those are the kind of things that we will be able to tease out of this work. Access, industrial, direct, residential perimeter access. We definitely need a preliminary access road layout, and we definitely need to have a referral to MOT. The next one is Robin actually spent the day today here. He was kind of convenient to ask him to stay for the meeting. So I don't know, Robin, if you can speak a little bit on the servicing.
Sure. As Zeno mentioned earlier, we broke the opportunities of residential light industry and laydown areas into three parts. One is your infill, where you already have your services, relatively easy to service a lot. Perimeter development is those areas that are adjacent to existing infrastructure. And then, of course, greenfield is just that. It's greenfield it requires. So one of the sites that we went to look at, Ian, was this one that was, just go back one slide. And the tendency always to look at servicing a development like this is what are the challenges? But there's the other side of that coin, and that is what are the opportunities? So if you're to service this parcel of land, access is definitely it's relatively accessible. There is no problems with storm because of the geography and the topography of the land. Water is right there. The trunk mains are there. Some of the infrastructure is older infrastructure. But this is where the opportunities come in that when you go to service this land, whether you service it through here or through its own infrastructure or to one of the adjacent outfalls, you do have an opportunity to upgrade those two infrastructures. So we walked this site. There was really no major surprises that came out of it, but there is opportunity if you have the foresight on how you want to service it. Combining it with the sanitary outfall with this development, putting in a 11th outfall or the other one on the adjacent. So the conclusion is that the site is serviceable. If council chooses to be a bit proactive, there is maybe some opportunities of upgrading some of your existing infrastructure.
So environmental sensitivity is another one. Brad Pollard, who's also on a project team, was to be here, but he couldn't. They also looked at that site last week and basically concluded that we do have some more work to do with the fish habitat because of the two creeks that are in there. With respect to the covering of the tree cover, it appears that it is all been already logged prior, and there aren't very many concerns with that. They didn't see any fish, any wildlife such as birds that are endangered species. And as far as the ecological value, there was notice of some highly productive plant sites that needs further investigation. And so basically, if you go to the next slide, essentially, we're showing you work in progress. We're showing you one site that we are looking for, and we are hoping that we can put these variety of the locations that we have identified and still in process of identifying to these kind of paces to come to what I ineptly call follow-up, but essentially those are the things that would need to be further expanded in order for anybody to be able to have better knowledge of possibility as to what can be developable. Next slide. So basically, there's lots of work that we need to do. We are continuously, Ian is continuously setting new layers of information to urban systems who are applying it into this method that we can't show you as of yet because we have not been able to purchase GIS licensing, hoping that by the next time we do this, we can, and we can show you the real show. we're going to be reviewing the findings and engaging council and the community as the time goes along. Next slides. Next slide. Which basically, it's a summer holiday season and increased demand on staff core responsibilities. As you've seen, we had 2 publics hearing tonight. There is more and more applications for development permits and such. So it's very difficult to kind of manage summer holidays and our responsibilities. And the best I can promise you is that I can bring the status report in September sometimes. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Krekic from members of council? Thank you very much to all of you for coming here this evening. We'll move on to reports and recommendations. There's a report from the Chief Financial Officer. This is regarding the June 2014 monthly financial report. Comes with a recommendation that Council receives this report for information purposes. Mrs. Bombin, would you like to outline your report, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Basically, since the financial statements have been audited and all the statutory requirements are complete, including the budget, now we can start our monthly information to Council on the financial status. So starting with revenues, the airport ferry revenue as compared to 2013 has increased due to increased ridership. Approximately 2,000 more passengers have ridden through the airport, resulting in almost $40,000 increase in revenue. 911 revenue continues to decline. It's in large part due to people moving towards mobile phones, and currently the mobile phones don't pay 911 revenue. We're trying to work towards that. This isn't just a municipal issue. It's a greater issue. It's a provincial, maybe even Canada-wide for some provinces. Compared to the same period of 2013, recreation revenue has seen an increase of $40,000. This increase has occurred mainly in the Civic Center and the pool operations. And another noted one is Watson Island revenues dropped approximately $475,000 because of the expiry of the Watco exclusivity agreement in January 2014, and the city is working to offset this decrease. Expenditures, most departments are well within budget for this time of year, with the 2014 financial plan being approved by Council in May and the onset of summer. The service and supplies budget is expected to be used to a greater extent. With respect to the utility budgets, the aggregate revenues and expenditures are expected to be close to budget. And capital purchases and capital works, with the approval of the financial plan, the planned capital projects scheduled to take place in summer 2014 are underway.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of Mrs. Bombin? If not, I'll ask. Yes, please go ahead, Councillor Ashley.
I was just going to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kinney. Any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Motion's adopted. Next is a report from the Corporate Administrator regarding the Civic Recognition Awards. The recommendation is that Council approves staff to advertise in the local paper for nomination requests for Civic Recognition Awards during the month of August 2014, and that upon closing off the qualifying period, the nomination requests be provided to all members of Council for consideration, upon which nominee to bestow each of the Civic Recognition Awards upon, and that September 30th, 2014 be approved as the date for the Civic Recognition Awards ceremony. Mr. Mandrick, would you like to outline for the people that are watching at home some of the text of your report so they can get an idea of the kind of awards that are considered and the reasoning for them and what each award stands for? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Each year, Council awards community members of distinction for outstanding efforts and contribution to the community at large through the Civic Recognition Awards policy. The background is the Council of the City of Prince Rupert may bestow a Civic Recognition Award when deemed appropriate for the formal recognition of outstanding achievements by an individual and or group. There's 6 levels of civic recognition which may be bestowed. There's the freedom of the city, which represents the highest honor that the city can bestow on an individual or unit of the Armed Forces of Canada or another nation in accordance with Section 158 of the Community Charter. There's also the Civic Merit Award, which represents an award bestowed on an individual who has brought distinction to the community through their outstanding achievement in one or more of the following areas: business and entrepreneurs, arts and entertainment, science and academics, health and education, sports and youth leadership, and volunteer and community service. The Civic Appreciation Award represents the expression of appreciation to an individual and or group for their services and or contributions that have benefited the community. There's also the Certificate of Appreciation, which represents the expression of appreciation to an individual for their contribution to a council, established committee, or task force to which they have been appointed. There's an appreciation pin, which represents the expression of appreciation to an individual who has volunteered for a committee of the city or the city for an event within the community. There's the Achievement Award, which represents an award given to an individual, team, or group of persons who achieve provincial, national, or international honors in various areas of endeavor or perform a noteworthy deed. There's the Sergeant William Booth Award for Valor, which represents an award presented to an individual who, acting on their own initiative or as members of volunteer organizations, demonstrate unusual humanitarian effort in order to help and protect their fellow citizens, sometimes placing themselves at great risk. And finally, there's the Council recognition of local citizens and businesses, which represents the significant wedding anniversaries and birthdays of local residents and also special occasions for local businesses.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Council's consideration of the recommendation. Councillor Ashley.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kinney. Discussion, Councillor Thorkelson.
Yes, there's actually, I was hoping that we could make sure that we could direct the public to come in and pick up the full policy before making nominations, because we have descriptions for each policy about who is able to nominate, and also who I guess restrictions of the reward are described. So, for example, the freedom of the city, the freedom of the city, the actual description says it's supposed to be for very few people, and it's the highest award we can have, and that's why on our wall here, I think that's the handful of people who have been honored with freedom of the city. So for the whole 100 and some odd years that we've been around, there's only, how many is that? 10 people?
10 people for 104 years. Yes.
That's right. And so some of them aren't given lightly at all. So I just want to make sure that the forms of recognition, the descriptions more than what was read, are available to the public, so that really people aren't embarrassed.
All right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Bombin, and then Councillor Cunningham.
I just wanted to mention that we can definitely put it on the city website and also advance it through our social media.
Councillor Thorkelson, or pardon me, Councillor Cunningham.
Corinne just covered it. I was going to suggest we put it in the website.
Thank you. Question's been called on the recommendation. Those in favor? Thank you. The motion is adopted. Next is a report from the engineering coordinator concerning the Atland parking lot regarding pay and display parking. It comes with a recommendation that the mayor and council approve the removal of the Atland pay parking area and reinstate the 2-hour parking limit. Mr. Pucci, good evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Your Worship. The engineering department is recommending we remove the pay parking kiosk at the Atland terminal and return it to 2-hour parking. We have noted a significant drop in revenue and even losses in the area. The table in my report shows the revenue versus expenses for repairs, scheduled maintenance, technology upgrades, seasonal commissioning and decommissioning, and fees for credit card usage. This table does not include the bylaw time or expenses, which is significant due to the changes in patrolling procedures. Additionally, parts are no longer available for this style of kiosk, so we would like to remove it and use it for spare parts for Rushbrook. Accordingly, this department continues to recommend the pay and display program at Rushbrook as the system generates revenue to maintain the area. In closure, we recommend removing the kiosk to save money and help streamline the enforcement of our bylaw officer. Plus, removing the kiosk will provide the spare parts to maintain the Rushbrook kiosk for the next little while. Thank you.
Thank you. Before council considers this, when you think about it for a while, there's no really good solution to this. Certainly, as soon as you pull that kiosk out of there, the employees and owners of the adjacent buildings and businesses will park there. And why wouldn't they? When it's raining and blowing, you want to get as close to your place of employment as possible. So if the council would like to do as is recommended here, I would also recommend to them that we send a letter to the port and point out to the Prince Rupert Port Authority that, because we're aware it could be their 40 to 60 odd employees that would park there, that they in fact open up their parking areas where right now it's their parking and their parking only, so that if their employees are going to come and park in this larger area, that the other area is also open in case we need overflow parking. Councillor Thorkelson.
I have some concerns about this. I really don't think it's. I can see that we shouldn't be having losing money, and it looks to me. I think in the revenue expense column, I imagine that the revenue where it says revenue is actually total. Is that the revenue minus expense? Because if that's the revenue, it means that we didn't make any money. I mean, that we lost money in the revenue column.
Mrs. Bauman?
That table was actually pulled from our accounting system, and revenues are denoted as credits. So actually, that's why it's in brackets. So it is full revenue of, let me just pull that here. So revenue, for example, for 2010 was indeed $5,226, with the expenses being $3,000. That would mean that there was a surplus of $2,000. However, as it was noted by Mr. Pucci, it does not account for the cost of the bylaw officer. When you start to factor that in, the Atlan Terminal parking area, does probably run break even or at a loss.
Thank you.
So I can see that you, last year in 2013 looks like there was a $600 loss, and in 2014 there is so far looks like there's a $1,000 loss. If the machine isn't working, it'll be more than that, but because we'll be getting no income. What I was looking at is though the time for bylaw enforcement. If we're going to have it every 2 hours, if we're going to have 2-hour bylaw enforcement, it means that you have to have, it's not just a daily enforcement period. You have to have a bylaw officer down there every 2 hours if you're going to enforce it. I mean, 2-hour parking means you have to have somebody there a couple of times a day, so I don't really see that the bylaw enforcement is going to be any less. But what I really do object to is having people from the Port Corporation and other businesses in the area going to be using this parking for free parking, because I doubt very much we're going to hire another bylaw officer to police the parking lot. So I imagine that people will park there when they're working, and having commercial fishermen who are at the other end, who are parking in a parking lot and do not use a boat launch. In fact, what they use is a park in the parking lot, but they use a federal facility, which is which is paid for and maintained both by them paying leases for land down. I mean, leases for a lot. So if you're a commercial fisherman, you have to lease a spot at the federal wharf, at the public wharf, and then you have to pay for the parking where you're going down there to maintain your business. It's no different than somebody working at a store. As somebody goes down, works on their boat.
Right.
So but on the other hand, I'm certainly not in the I don't think the city should be providing a free service for the boat launch. Also, there's a big wear and tear on our streets and from all of the parking. And I think the city's done an admirable job of trying to put in parking down there at Rushwick Float for all of the trailers. So, I think that, I brought it up a couple of times, and I think other councillors have too, is trying to do something for the commercial fleet. That is a commercial harbor. It's not that Rushbrook is a commercial harbor. It is not a dock for pleasure craft, although pleasure craft do tie up there. And as such, I would hope that we would, if we're going to do this, that we would not charge commercial fishermen, that they would have to, if they can get a sign from the wharfinger that they're paying for rent, then they should not be charged for their parking there. Whereas anybody who is not who's not a commercial fisherman paying commercial rates to the wharfinger's office, that they would have to pay down there. That equals things off, because it's people doing something for pleasure as compared to people doing something for a business. And we're going to give the port and other businessmen, business people in Cow Bay and employees in Cow Bay relief, then the commercial fleet should be getting relief at the other end.
So just to follow through what you're saying, if somebody's using the Cow Bay commercial docks and they're paying a wharfinger fee or a moorage fee to a wharfinger there, the wharfinger would issue them a pay slip or a receipt that they would then put in the windshield of their vehicle when they're parking across from the Atlan terminal or the Homework store or Smiles Cafe. Is that what you're envisioning?
No, I wasn't too worried at that end, because that's to our free parking, and a fisherman wants to go down. He's in the same. A fisherman is in the same, has the same problems all of the other employees who are working anywhere down there. It's at the other end. It's at the Rushbrook parking lot, where fishermen are paying moorage to the wharfinger at that end.
So is that any fisherman? Is that the recreational fishermen also, or just the commercial fleet?
Well, I'm looking at the commercial fleet, and the reason I'm looking at the commercial fleet is because that is a commercial dock, right? It's supposed to be a commercial dock. Remember, we had the foofra down there about cleaning sports fish. It's considered to be a commercial dock, and we have provided, the city has provided that boat ramp is a City of Prince Rupert's, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So the boat ramp is ours, and so we provided that. We provided a parking lot. I think the city leases the property from Canadian Fish for the boat launch and for the property. And what I'm suggesting is that if at the Cow Bay site, where there was a ticket machine and we're now going to provide free parking, at the other end, we should provide free parking for those business people down there who need to look after their vessels. And if the only way they can prove that they're business people down there is to get a payment from the wharf, or a chit from the wharfinger to put in their window.
How about the commercial charter boat operators, of which there are many? Prince Rupert, that's our largest tourism activity, is commercial sports fishing.
The difference is that they use the boat launch, whereas the commercial fleet does not use the boat launch.
They just use the parking.
They use the parking to access their vessels, whereas people who are using the boat launch, those are the sports fish operators.
Okay, well, we have other members of council that want to comment. I'll just say one other thing, that if we go to 2-hour parking down there at Cow Bay, it doesn't work for some of the various operators there. And I'm thinking more of the people that take somebody out whale watching or take somebody to Kutsumatine Inlet to look at grizzly bears. They're gone for the whole day. So you have people that drive down here, are going to spend a night in town, going to spend money in the restaurants. They're going out for a whole day. There's no provision if there's just 2-hour parking for them. But let's get some other comments. Councillor Garon, Councillor Cunningham, and then Councillor Ashley. Please
Yeah,
go ahead.
I've just got a few things. I just wanted to get back on topic. I thought we were talking about the Atlan parking terminal, not parking lot, not the Rushbrook parking lot. I've got a few questions. One's about the machine. If so, it sounds like both machines, the one in Rushbrook and the one in Cow Bay, are both non. I mean, they're out of date. You can't get parts for either one of them.
Correct. They've stopped making that series of machine.
The other problem down there now is the info center is back down there, and I did have a business down there for 12 years. You have large vehicles pulling motorhomes. People in campers, people wanting to get the info center information and need to park in that parking lot. So those people will more or less be coming and going, but there seems to be that there always is room to park in there. So once you open that up to free 2-hour parking, free for all, you're going to have all kinds of business people parking in there. Even if you ask them not to park there, they are going to park there. You're going to have people heading out fishing, parking there all day again. We don't have enough bylaw officers. We can't afford another bylaw officer. So I don't see where saving a couple $1,000s is going to alleviate the problem at all. So I would like to see that kiosk still in there. I don't know what it would cost to change over to a new one, but it showed in the parking study when I was on there, that was the one area where there was a problem and we needed to alleviate the problem. There is no right or wrong, but it seemed to be working for the summer season where everybody moved away from that area to let tourists and or other people that wanted to use the facilities in the area to use that parking lot. So I would like to see it left as is for the time being.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
I am going to mirror both Councillor Thorkelson and Garon. I don't like the idea of the commercial fishermen or the fishermen down at Rushbrook having to pay, and people that have high-paying jobs get free parking. I just, whatever it costs, I find it rather ironic that we're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. It's funny how the kiosk down at Rushbrook is going to be kept working, but the one at Atlan isn't. I would rather see us, if we have to invest in a new kiosk, than we do. And the other thing is, I keep hearing that the money coming from the Rushbrook parking is going into infrastructure there, and all I get is complaints about the ramp down there.
Councillor Cunningham, later this year, there will be a reconstruction and resurfacing of the bottom of the ramp, and the fees that are collected from the users there are going to pay for that.
That's good, because it should have been done at the beginning of the year, not the end, but that's besides the point. But I definitely don't support this. Sorry.
Right. There was no hot mix available at the beginning of the year, but I appreciate what you're saying. Councillor Ashley.
Well, thank you for the report. I mean, I can see why you've put it forward. I mean, we're losing money on it, so it makes sense that you come forward and saying, well, I don't know, is this a good idea? What do you guys think? I can certainly see the points that everybody has made. Obviously, we don't have the money to hire another bylaw officer, which, the kiosk kind of sort of at least makes people think, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't stay there longer. But then again, if it's not working, people will eventually figure that out as well, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. What I'm wondering, and I think that we might need to have a little more time to think about this, right? Because there's obviously a lot of things to consider, not just this parking lot, but the, Rushbrook and making sure that there's fairness, etc. And I was just thinking, maybe there's other options we could do. Could we, because I agree with Councillor Cunningham, it's not really fair that people get free parking when other people that are in a different industry don't get free parking, right? So we need to make sure that there's some fairness, but we also need to make sure that we're, maintaining, parking spaces, etc. So I was wondering, perhaps we need to look into other options, like where, say the port or commercial fishermen, etc., could buy discounted monthly or daily passes that they just stick on their vehicle, so that if a bylaw officer's going by, they see it in their window, okay, no problem, right? As opposed to, and they use the kiosks more for those people that are, more temporary types of things. Now, I'm not saying that's the answer, but that's why I'm saying I think there's more thought that needs to be put into this, because there's obviously a lot of issues. what I'm looking at, like Mayor Musalem was saying, what about the people going out on the adventure tours and stuff, and there's 9 to 5 and there's only a 2-hour parking spot, right? Um, you know, could you have daily passes that were available at the visitor info center? I don't know, but I think I'm going to move because I don't think there's anything been moved yet, has
No,
there?
you can make a motion
Okay.
to table if you'd like.
I'm going to move to table so that we can perhaps have a workshop on this and look at some different options, because I just think there's so many different things, and it's not because I don't appreciate staff bringing it forward, but there's so many different ideas coming forward. I think we could end up going around and around and around and not come up to a solution.
Certainly. Well, a motion to table has precedence. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kenny. Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion to table sticks. Matter is tabled. Look forward to your next report, Mr. Pucci. Next, we'll move on to, in this case, it's item E before item D at the request of staff, and this is another report from the engineering coordinator. This is regarding the landfill development, Mr. Pucci.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. By way of resolution, the Engineering Department is requesting that Mayor and Council receive this context report and approve the allocation of $1.5 million out of gas tax towards landfill development. The city owns and operates its landfill 8 kilometers from town on Ridley Island Road. The landfill is commissioned or was commissioned in 1991 and has a lifespan of approximately 100 years, dependent on waste intake volumes. The Prince Rupert landfill has been operating on its Phase 1 and Phase 2 footprint for many years. The airspace within this footprint is now completely exhausted. As a result, the landfill has been raised to a higher level than originally planned, and during its operations, the slopes have been constructed at steeper angles than specified by the Ministry of Environment. Progressive closure of Phase 1 and 2 will be required, but the side slopes will need to be reduced so that they can be closed reliably. Sperling Hansen and Associates has recommended a lateral expansion on both the east and west sides of the landfill to allow for the construction of these slopes. A recent review of the water quality has concluded that the landfill is having minimum impact on the surface waters and minor impact on groundwaters. However, the collected leachate that is discharged into the ocean is impacted by contaminants. The Engineering Department, in consultation with the Ministry of Environment, are developing a localized permit for allowable discharge limits of ammonia and other contaminants. The Engineering Department recognizes that major upgrades to the existing treatment system is required in the near future. The Prince Rupert landfill currently receives over 12,000 tons of waste per year, which uses more than 24,000 cubic meters of airspace. Although this number was relatively constant for years, the volumes are increasing due to regional development, home renovations, more stringent wood-burning policies and bans, multiple commercial building fires, and multiple residential home demolitions. To put this into perspective, an average size building takes up approximately 5 months worth of airspace if not separated properly. Current landfill practice. Due to lack of space, the city was landfilling on the crest of Phase 2. Sperling Hansen and Associates expressed concerns about slope stability of the fill and advised the city to move landfilling operations off of the crest. Since that time, landfilling was moved to a small sliver on the northwest corner of the footprint. But that space is now completely exhausted, and the landfill staff are currently backfilling on the crest because of no other option. In order to buy some time until the new Phase 3 expansion area is fully quarried and to reduce the steepness of the existing slopes, Sperling Hansen and Associates recommended the city expand the landfill bilaterally with buttress fills, first to the east, then to the west. Fully engineered rock berms with engineered liners and leachate collection will be installed to ensure the leachate will be reliably captured and routed to the leachate treatment system in accordance with our landfill permitting. Landfill expansion. In order to implement the buttress lateral expansions, it is absolutely critical that the eastern expansion area be constructed in this summer's construction season, starting in August of 2014. The eastern expansion is expected to provide about 2/3 of the total new airspace, resulting in 2 years' worth of expected landfill capacity. During the lateral expansion design, it was recommended that the rock quarry be developed in the south expansion area. This will provide the construction material for the rock berms and operational cover, plus create the airspace within the footprint. Once the east and west expansion areas are completely exhausted, the city should be able to transition into the Phase 3 area. Although the future of waste generation for the City of Prince Rupert and the region will be dependent on the growth that is experienced from the potential LNG projects, at present rate of airspace consumption, 24,000 cubic meters per year, the available capacity in Phase 3 is expected to provide approximately 50 years worth of airspace. However, as our intake tonnage grows per year, and if the city experiences the projected hyper-economic growth, this timeline could be drastically reduced. Landfill expansion. The engineering department with Sperling Hansen and Associates recommend the following development sequence for the Prince Rupert landfill. First, the completion of the east expansion area. This will provide approximately 75,000 cubic meters of capacity for waste. This expansion area should provide the capacity until the end of 2017. These photos are taken of the East Side Road in March of 2014 before the berm was constructed and June of 2014 after the berm road was constructed. The difference in elevation is approximately 8 meters, which took approximately 54,000 cubic meters of rock. A liner, leachate collection system, and force main extension must be constructed in the summer of 2014 in order to complete this area and allow it to start receiving waste. Once the east expansion area is nearing completion, we will need to move on to the west expansion area. The west expansion area will provide approximately 45,000 cubic meters of airspace for waste and should provide capacity to the end of 2018. Much like the east expansion area, the west expansion area will require a berm road, liner, and leachate pump station upgrades before the area can receive waste. This slide shows the current state of the west side of the landfill and what it will look like once it is completed, very similar to the east side. Accordingly, once the west side expansion area is receiving waste, the south expansion area will need to be developed. The south expansion area, once quarried, will provide approximately 50 years of airspace at the current residential waste intake rates. However, it should be noted that all of these estimates could drastically be reduced depending on the regional growth. Progressive closure of Phase 1 and Phase 2 is the single most important step in controlling the fill intake and leachate discharge from the Prince Rupert landfill. Sperling Hansen and Associates recommend that the east side be closed as soon as the eastern expansion area is completed and the slopes are reduced. Our latest projections suggest that this project should occur in the summer of 2017. Sperling Hansen and Associates estimates that the cost of this closure at approximately $1 million. Progressive closure of the west side of Phase 1 and 2 will need to take place when the west expansion area is completely exhausted. Currently, we are projecting that will occur at the end of 2018. The closure cost is estimated at $1.2 million. Leachate treatment. Today, 100% of the rain that falls on the landfill is collected and routed through the treatment system. With progressive closure, the total leachate going through the system can be reduced to about 20%. These flow reductions will be realized after 2018 once progressive closure of Phase 1 and 2 is completed. Sperling Hansen and Associates recommend that a major upgrade to the treatment system be undertaken, but that the work be conducted only after the progressive closure for the east and west expansion areas are completed. The engineering department and Sperling Hansen and Associates has prepared a rough budget estimate and schedule for the required works set out in this context report. The east expansion berm, spring of 2014, $600,000. This is completed. East expansion liner, summer of 2014, $1.5 million, and this is what we're proposing. West expansion berm, spring 2016, $500,000. West expansion pump station, summer 2016, $1 million. West expansion liner 2016, $700,000. Preparing and lining of Phase 3, summer of 2017, $1.5 million. Phase 1 and 2 progressive closure, summer of 2017, $1.4 million. Phase 1 and 2 west progressive closure, summer of 2018, $1.3 million. And leachate treatment system upgrade, summer of 2018, $2 million. Total is approximately $9.5 million between now and the end of 2018. At present, the city has accrued $2.25 million towards landfill closure and has budgeted another $200,000 to be added in 2014. In order to complete the above noted works, stay on schedule, and maintain the level of service, we need to review our current rates for residents versus non-residents, or demolition rates, as they are the main contributor to the lack of our airspace. Additionally, a more rigorous recycling program can be reviewed. Although this expansion work is required a year ahead of schedule due to an increase in the city's waste intake from regional development, home renovations, more stringent wood burning policies and bans, multiple commercial building fires, multiple residential home demolitions, it is a critical project to keep the landfill gates open and maintain compliance for our permits. Violations of the Ministry of Environment permitting can be extremely sizable with no tangible benefit to the landfill or the city. Accordingly, in order to keep the landfill operational and maintain the current level of service, the city needs to follow the plan laid out in this context report. Currently, the east side berm has been completed, and although it's over budget, it was a necessary step towards creating the desperately needed airspace. This berm is the foundation of getting the landfill back on track. Moving forward, it is essential that the city continue with the east side expansion by lining the area and installing the new leachate collection pipeline so it can start receiving waste. The cost of this project is approximately $1.5 million, and the engineering department proposes to fund it out of gas tax over the next year. This project qualifies for gas tax funding, and the city will receive $500,000 this year with another $3.4 million available. By using $1.5 out of gas tax funding, there will be no effect to the annual budget, and we would reduce the accrued gas tax to $2.4 million for future city qualifying projects. I trust that this summary has provided a concise overview of the works that are currently being completed and planned for the City of Prince Rupert landfill by the Engineering Department with consultation from Sperling Hansen Associates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pucci. Good report. We'll see if there's any questions from members of council. Councillors? Councillor Garon.
Thank you, Mr. Pucci. I just think that we need to start implementing more stringent bans on items that can go to the landfill site. Just people separating more things, even when they're doing demolitions. I don't know what all that looks like, but we're going to run out of room faster than what you say, I believe. So there's got to be a better way of doing things. So I'm sure you've got your thinking cap on, but I don't know, how people are going to start implementing things like that. But I think it's something we need to start doing sooner than later.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, recycling is a big thing. I know we're looking at it, but maybe we should just prod it a bit more. And how about an incinerator out there for the wood products? I notice when I've taken stuff out there, there's a hell of a lot of stuff going in those bins that doesn't have to go in there. There's 2x4s, a lot of wood product that shouldn't be going into them. I don't know. I know the staff does a good job of monitoring and that, but they can't be watching all the time. It's been pretty heavy traffic going back and forth when I've been out there, and they're not monitoring what's going into those bins. But I don't know if we need extra staff out there or what we do, but I really think we can cut down on it quite a bit by recycling, possibly looking at some sort of incinerator setup so that a lot of the burnable stuff can be burnt. I don't know the costs of those, but I'm quite sure there's provincial programs and federal programs we can tap into. I'd like to see more done that way.
Councillor Ashley.
I was going to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kenny. Councillor Thorkelson.
Yeah, I think that was a great report. And Councillor Garant has always wanted to go to see the the water, I think that maybe we should all go to see the landfill site. And it's always hard to guess what you're doing from the pictures when from those kinds of pictures. So, but I do think that you've done a very good job, and I think your recommendations are right on. My concern again is what Councillor Garon and Councillor Cunningham is suggesting. If we can find another way, especially we just spent some time with our city planner looking at the old housing stock, and looks 50% of the housing in Prince Rupert is in need of minor or major renovation. Renovations are going to start happening now. I was just reading the WCB WorkSafe magazine. I'm sure you got the same issue. And it talked about asbestos removal, and particularly about asbestos removal of drywall. In most of the housing stock in Prince Rupert has asbestos drywall tape, at least asbestos in the mud, and I don't think it's in the drywall itself. Wasn't specific, but they were talking about if that's the case, that then you have to send it to Alberta. So our workers shouldn't really be subjected. CUPE workers should be subjected to mushing up asbestos-laden material in our landfill. And so I think that it might be a really good project to really have a think about what we should be accepting, what we shouldn't be accepting into landfill, and figuring out how we can do that, looking at demolition material. And I do agree with Councillor Garon, that as recycling grows, that we should be looking at, besides curbside recycling sometime in the future, that we should also have a look at doing something with recycling of compostables, right? So that we can have a compostable center, so we're not putting that in.
One of the problems, of course, is that the province no longer allows you to burn like we could in the past. So you're finding a lot of that's going in the landfill. It is, you look at that housing study, there's 26 houses there that are considered teardowns. Takes up a lot of space. Councillor Ashley.
Just on the whole thing about stopping people from putting stuff in the landfill that should go to recycling. I remember this, and I have no idea how long ago it was, but I remember making a resolution that I'm pretty sure got passed, and it could be quite a while ago, but it was about bringing the garbage bylaw or landfill bylaw out for us to do exactly that. Now, I understand staff has been swamped with everything, but I would appreciate if we could look and see where that is in the list of all the to-dos, because I remember making that motion, and I think that might be timely with this to take a look at that.
Thank you.
I can comment on that. I believe Bill Horn started that process, and we can look into that. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, on the cost factors there, where are you getting those figures from?
The cost factors for the work that needs to be done over the next 5 to 7 years, that is through Sperling Hansen and Associates. They are landfill engineers out of Vancouver, and they put together those estimates for us.
They're the same ones that underestimated the fill settlement?
Correct, yes, they are.
So the motion's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Next is another report from the engineering coordinator. This is the landfill development contract payment. The recommendation is that the mayor and council approve the overage payment on the landfill development contract as reviewed by the engineering department. Mr. Pucci, would you like to outline your report, please?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This one ties into the last one, the last report. Some of it will be repeated a bit, but I'll go through it quickly. The Prince Rupert landfill has been operating on its existing footprint for many years. During this time, landfill staff have been trying to keep the footprint within the leachate containment area last as long as possible. Unfortunately, The airspace within this footprint is now completely exhausted. Accordingly, at the October 15th, 2013 council meeting, council approved the engineering department to enter into a 4-year contract with Coast Industrial Construction for the drilling, blasting, and crushing at the Prince Rupert landfill site. This contract also included the first stage of the landfill expansion by way of the East Berm Road. Unfortunately, as this project progressed, it was apparent that the fill volumes projected by our landfill engineers were underestimated due to the amount of settlement. Nevertheless, this project could not be postponed due to the depleting airspace. In order to maintain compliance for our permits and to allow the city to sustain the current levels of waste disposal service, it was imperative to continue with the development. Accordingly, it is also critical that the city continue with the landfill development project and complete the east and west lateral expansion areas. The total invoice amount is $624,801.76. However, this does not include the credit of $458,582 to the city upon gravel sales. The gravel sales would bring the total for this stage of the project from $624,801.76 to approximately $166,219.76. Understanding that this is considerably more than the original price of approximately $53,197.95, it was necessary to continue the project to carry on with our waste disposal service. The engineering department, in consultation with the finance department, is proposing to pay this $113,000 overage by way of the landfill closure account. We have confirmed with our landfill engineers that this work is part of the overall operational closure plan. Therefore, we would like to fund the overage from our accruals, which would in turn not affect the 2014 annual budget. Additionally, the engineering department is working with the proponent on site to look at cost savings opportunities for this invoice and future expansion work. The engineering department is seeking approval to pay for this overage on the landfill development contract as reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Garon. Councillor Ashley? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Go ahead, Councillor Cunningham.
One question, we discussed this a little bit earlier today. The sale of the gravel, is that at market value, or are they getting it because they're working there at a discount, or how do we sell that to them?
The contract was for them to have our quarry for 4 years with 150,000 cubic meters of material. That material, then as they sell the material, we get a royalty off that of $3 a cubic meter, which then in turn gets us to $458,000. So it's $3 and maybe 2 cents or something like that, but it's a royalty paid on as they sell the gravel, and they have guaranteed to have the by way of the contract to have it out at the door by in the 4 years.
What's a cubic meter of gravel go for right now? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, no, I'm not sure. We use our own gravel internally, so we don't necessarily purchase gravel outside. Sorry.
Any further discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. We'll move on to bylaws and thank you, Mr. Pucci, from all of us. Double thank you from Councillor Ashley. Under bylaws and development permits, there's a report from the city planner, and this concerns a rezoning to allow a multifamily development at 1183 Ambrose Avenue. The recommendation is that following the public hearing, council gives third reading and adopts the City of Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3348,2014. I'll ask council their consideration of the recommendation. Councillor Kinney? Okay, Councillor Garon? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Next is a report from the city planner. This concerns zoning amendment bylaw number 3286, 209, amendment to adjust the downtown development permit area boundary. Councillor Thorkelson, you may wish to leave. Mr. Mandrick, please show for the record that Councillor Thorkelson is leaving for the moment. The recommendation for Council's consideration is that following the public hearing, Council gives third reading and adopts the City of Prince Rupert Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 33492014. I'll ask Council their consideration of the recommendation. Councillor Garon.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ashley?
I'll second it for discussion. I haven't decided yet.
Okay. Is there, the motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion regarding the motion? Councillor Cunningham and then Councillor Garon.
Okay, I don't support this simply because of the large number of nonprofit organizations down there that are always scrounging for money, looking for money, and this is going to impact their bottom line. Until we can find a way through administration or something else, I would either say we table this to a later date and find out how we can help them out, or we just leave it out of the downtown area for the time. I think it's going to impact them considerably in the next few years. They're old, tired buildings, and they're going to need a lot of work done on them.
Thank you. Councillor Garon.
I'm going to support this recommendation only because if we want the area to become part of downtown, we need to start to look like downtown. We could start putting banners in there and making it a part of the downtown core. Most of the buildings down there are owned by private business people. I don't think they're all owned by nonprofit people. The change is not affecting the way anybody's doing business down there right now. It's only if they're going to make drastic changes, like if you want to paint your building, you go get a small permit. What's it cost, Mr. Krekic? $60 or?
Actually, we don't have paint as part of it, but small things are anything below $5,000 is $60.
So a lot of maintenance on those buildings, people aren't going to have to pay any extra money for. It's not going to affect their. Well, if you're just maintaining your building, you're not going to need to come and get a development permit from Mr. Krekic. I've had to participate in some of these things myself, even getting. Picking out colors for your building, you still have to have it approved by the building department. Also, the pay in lieu of parking, as you say, if one of those businesses down there decides to sell and someone wants to set up a restaurant, they won't be able to have pay in lieu for parking. So they will not be able to change the use of their building. So if Mr. West wants to sell his building and someone wants to put in a restaurant or a hair salon or something that's going to require more parking, that use cannot take place. It has to stay as it is. So that's a detriment to doing business in Prince Rupert. And we want to have an even playing field for all of the commercial and businesses in downtown Prince Rupert. It wasn't fair when Cow Bay was stuck all by itself, having to conform, and other businesses could go about their business in a different way. So it just leaves an even playing field for the city, and everybody plays under the same rules. A lot of not-for-profit businesses can go out to the community and get donations for certain things. So I don't see a problem. People come out of Prince Rupert and do help out with organizations. We have a lot of people that will help out and give money. So I really don't see it as a problem. It just hinders the community looking good. And as far as paving or looking after sidewalks, my business where I'm down in Cow Bay, it's winter time, I shovel, I end up with snow from the plow all over my sidewalk. I have to go out again and shovel. It's just something we have to deal with. And if the city had more money, we could send out more plows on a regular basis. So as far as trying to maintain a park-like area, if the city again had more money, we could groom more places and clear out more trees, but we don't at this point in time. So I don't see where it's anything to do with fairness or not being fair. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
Well, I seconded it for discussion purposes because I can see two sides here, and I'm torn. I do think that we want to have a downtown, and I think most people would agree that we want to have a downtown that's vibrant, that's inviting, that people want to see, and we want it to be maintained. But I also know that we want to support the nonprofits in town and those groups and try to make things a little easier if we can. So to me, what's stopping me at this point from voting for this is that I would like to see us have some sort of things in the way of permits and other things that needed to be got, some sort of adjustment or allowance made for nonprofits within the entire development permit area so that we can ease the burden a little bit. And I realize that that is a different way of looking at it, but I think I don't want to see it that they don't have to follow the same necessarily rules, because I think there is a benefit to having sort of a unified kind of nice looking downtown area. But I don't see, I agree with Councillor Garon. I think that there needs to be flexibility for if somebody wants to sell a property and somebody else wants to do a different use, you don't want to have somebody not be able to do that. But I guess I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want the nonprofits to be able to do stuff, and I want the downtown to look like it should.
Thank you. Councillor, let's go to Mrs. Bauman first, then Councillor Cunningham, then Councillor Garon.
I just wanted to remind, although you did allude to it earlier, Your Worship, that I would like to remind all of council that next year Fraser Street is actually slated for being repaved, but it's also going to include sidewalks, new lighting. So it will bring Fraser Street back into the downtown look, anyway, more updated and definitely more user friendly.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham, then Councillor Garon.
Fraser Street tenant or residents now pay taxes like anyone else. Are they a second-class neighborhood because they're not in the downtown area? You know, like I find this rather irrelevant discussion. You know, these.
Hold on here, Councillor. Every member duly elected is allowed to provide their thoughts on a matter.
I'm providing my thoughts.
Whether or not you think it's relevant or irrelevant, we provide a safe environment here. Everybody is allowed to say how they feel, just like you are.
Yeah, and I'm saying it. I'm just thinking it's rather interesting the way the discussion's going, that we're pointing to this part of the town as they're second-class citizens, even though they pay the same taxes now that anyone else does. I don't see why they have to be part of the downtown permit area to get anything that the rest of the town gets.
Thank you. Councillor Garon.
I'm not alluding to anybody being a second-class citizen. I think if you're going to do some work on a building and it's going to cost you $50,000, if you're a nonprofit and you've been able to come up with $50,000 to redo your building, I don't, Mr. Krekic, what would the fee be on that?
$235.
If you can afford the $50,000, I'm sure you can come up with another $200 for the permit. So I really don't think that it's stopping anybody from doing any work on their building. And like I say, as a nonprofit, you can go to the community and get them to help support your project. And people in this community will do that kind of thing. I would just hate to see some building owners that are, you know, someone like Mr. West. He says he's happy where he is right now. If he wanted to sell his building and retire, or some other individual for that matter who had a building and that was their sole course of their retirement, how would they can't sell their building because somebody wanted to change the use, and now they can't sell their building. So now that it's going to become in disrepair because they're getting older, they're not working, or they're stuck with their building. So being you can't change that use, this puts it into a field where they have the ability to sell their building and the use can change. Right now, it cannot change because you cannot pay in lieu of parking if it is in the current state that it is now. So that's sort of one of the main reasons. But also, we want to bring everybody into the same playing field and make it easier for staff to deal with what's going on in the town. And it just keeps it a little simpler for everybody to play in the same ballpark.
Good comments. Councillor Kinney, have you got anything you'd like to say?
Well, I'm in agreement with Councillor Cunningham, and I feel the same way because we have a lot of people on that street that do a lot for our city and they just can't afford to see it being done. They can't.
Right. Well, there's two good points of view here. Councillor Ashley.
Well, I guess I could see, I can see Councillor Grant's point in that it's not a lot of money. Like, you know, if you're $50,000, 230 isn't a lot of money. However, I guess I'm just looking at it, it's that much less money that they have to pay if we were to put a different bylaw in, and it just is a little bit of help. That's all I'm saying. And I don't think it would have a big impact on the city's bottom line, considering it is only a small amount of money for us to change that bylaw for nonprofits. I could be wrong. I the flexibility issue is a point with me, because I remember people coming in, and I think it was last year, and it was people from Fraser Street, and I remember them coming in because I believe they wanted to sell their building, and I believe they were having property with exactly this issue. Mr. Krekic, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do, but I can't remember the circumstances. And that was the U Brew store. I frankly can't remember the circumstances.
I do remember, though, them coming and having a concern, and that might have been what prompted looking into this. No, it's not? Okay.
No, what prompted is really our work out in a field, and I appreciate everything that's being said, and I don't want to really take it off the kilter at all. But it really is an inadvertent mistake. That area should have been, that line did not include that area, not because of any specific thing. It was just the slip of a pen. And I think that that many of these comments are very, very well put forward, but really it's about the downtown design guidelines. I think parking is one aspect of it, but the downtown design guidelines, we all agree that we should have them. I went through the entire year talking to the contractors and builders and owners, and it remained there. So it is a good tool.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
One more question just about that then, because I know that one of the concerns of the nonprofit groups and people that were presenting to us was cost, right? I think we figured out that parking's not a cost, and I think perhaps there's another way we could deal with if the application amount was too much. I think we could probably find another way around that. I guess my question is, can you see what kinds of extra costs could there be for a business or a nonprofit other than the application because of the downtown permit area guidelines? Like, what sort of, is there anything that would increase their cost because of certain materials they have to use or certain other things they have to use? Is there anything you could see where it's like, well, you can't use this, so therefore your cost is going to go up?
There's only 2 nonprofits on that part that's been excluded. There are dozens of nonprofits in downtown and Cow Bay areas. Yeah. And so I've never really heard from them that their fees are too much for the applications. I have heard a lot of complaints from other things, but I did not hear that, that if somebody comes to me with an extreme hardship, Your Worship, I have waived the application fees when I feel it's an extreme hardship. We are not making money on these application fees. The application fee is but a small, minute responsibility of the person submitting application that we know it's a right thing to do for us. Additional cost? Yes. In addition to the permit fees, we do have specifications for materials, specifications for signage, and all of those are existing in a zoning bylaw, and we are just applying them with a slightly more attention to it. But in the end, I've been able to manage everybody who comes in.
So essentially what you're saying is that there's not that much cost difference, even though I realize that I'm just asking what maybe you don't have the answer, but based on those different materials, is it going to be, in your opinion, is it going to be an increased cost or not?
So if you want to put a corrugated sheet metal on your building, we prefer that you don't do that. So it's going to be slightly more to put in a slightly flatter profile cladding onto the building. Yes, there is additional cost to it, but there's also a benefit from doing that.
Thank you. Councillor Garon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Krekik, I do remember you having several open houses on that downtown development permit area, correct?
Many houses, and I spent the entire year with the contractors in this room here for an entire year when council asked me to review, do we need development permit area or no?
And I remember taking part in those discussions, and it was lengthy, and we had all kinds of community members coming out that wanted their downtown to look a certain way and be a certain way. And it's just inadvertently that that area was left out, and I just don't see any reason why it can't be brought in. There really aren't any really big hardships that are going to be afforded upon anybody, other than, like you say, I'm sure if some group went in and said they couldn't afford the $200 fee, and it would stop their project from going ahead, possibly, if they were a nonprofit society. If you've got the ability to do that, great. If you don't, great too. But so it sounds like there might be some kind of flexibility if there is a hardship. So, you know, if the individual is going to do $150,000 renovation, obviously the $200 is not going to be a hardship. So I just don't see where anybody's being penalized on being into a downtown development permit area.
Councillor Cunningham.
I'm not worried about the $235 fee. I'm worried about the having to upgrade, say, an old building like the Fisherman's, for example, when it has to or wants to change its exterior, and then it has to start fitting into the downtown plan. And the upgrade to some of the materials that will be required won't be a few dollars. They'll be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And I think you can attest to that because it's happened in the other buildings downtown already where people have wanted to do something and they've been told, no, they've got to do it a particular way.
Thank you. Okay, just before we call for the vote, or call for the question so we can vote, I'll tell you that I will vote against this. The reason being is that that street needs a lot of improvement. And I would think that if this matter is brought back to the council a year from now, or 12 months, 14 months from now, when the improvement's been done, it would be more acceptable. So at this point, I'm voting against it. It's not that it's a matter of the nonprofits, it's a matter of that street needs a lot of repair before it can look like the rest of downtown and really join the rest of downtown. And we've heard from people here this evening. We haven't heard from everybody, but they all got notices. Everybody would have had the opportunity to come forward. And I think it would be a happier state of affairs if the improvements were done. And so I'll certainly consider it next year, God willing. Councillor Ashley.
Oh, so the first thing, I appreciate how much work you've put into this, so please don't take it personally. I have a question, though. If we vote against this, and let's say a business on that street then wanted to sell and wasn't part of the downtown development permit area, could they apply to council to become part of that separately? I know that it would be a difficult thing, but I'm just asking because of I'm concerned about what Councillor Garon said about flexibility and change of use.
Technically speaking, anybody can apply for anything that they wish to do. The next point is the analysis and the recommendation to the council and discussion that probably will bring in a similar conversation like this. Putting in a one unit, say for example that that Mr. West decides that he wants to have development permit, I think it would be very awkward and difficult to have one lot amongst the rest, because then it becomes you know, the only reason to apply for the permit is not to abide by what the community requires to create a certain feeling in downtown, but to suffice for his personal benefits, to which end I would probably recommend against. Of course, it will be at council's desire how they would like to proceed further.
Mr. Krekik, you could, though, in an extreme case, accommodate through a development variance permit?
It's a similar point, Your Worship, that in situations like this, I need to see, working on short stories is very difficult, meaning hypothetical questions and points. There has to be a full application with facts, but it would be it'd be an extreme example where I could see that the development variance permit would be applicable for that location only within a context of everything that has taken place.
Right, thank you. I'll call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? Those opposed? The motion fails. We'll move on to the next report from the city planner. This is an application for a development variance permit for number DP-14-15 for 119 8th Avenue West. The recommendation to council is that the development variance permit application of the stated number and the stated address proceeds to a public notification process. Mr. Krekic, do you want to briefly outline this matter, please? Right, Mr. Mandrick just went to get her. Please come ahead, Mr. Krekic.
This application is for development variance permit on 119 8th Avenue West. This is the subject area here, just off McBride. And the application is actually quite well prepared. It is to vary the front property setback. I have the details inside. The reason that I want to show you that the application is really connected to some of the conversation we had about wouldn't you know that I would do this? So this is the amount of this is the setback variance here. But the point I really want to show you is the house. This is what we would consider the wartime house, and we have spoken a great deal earlier today about housing stock and such. And this kind of shows how a relatively modest and house can be translated into a well-developed little property that's not necessarily large, but definitely will improve the housing stock. So within a context of the neighborhood and the location, the development variance will not affect the neighborhood, and my recommendation is to proceed to public notification, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. I'll ask council's consideration. Councillor Garon?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Moving on, next we're to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor Cunningham?
I'd like to make a resolution on that earlier comment that Christine Nelson made about a resolution to support Fisherman Hall as it goes forth for a gaming license.
Right, that's correct. So it would be a letter of support for the
Yeah.
organization and its worth to the community. And that letter of support would go to the BC Lottery Corporation. Yep. It's moved by Councillor Cunningham.
It's one way to shut you up.
There's legal cases about staying in the doorway. You have to get clear. Thank you. So it's been moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Mr. Mandrick, if you'd do three things at once there.
She's to the right.
Thank you. Now that Councillor Thorkelson's back in the room, we'll go on to reports, questions, and inquiries. Are there any this evening?
I just got one more quick thing to say.
Certainly.
I'd like to take a minute to recognize the work that Donna and her helper have done with the flowers in the city and that. I think it looks really good. It's, you know, not just singling out that one particular part of CUPE. All the workers do a good job, but it's such a visual thing to see right now with all the flowers blooming and everything.
Donna's achievements are certainly recognized every year by the general public. I get a lot of comments, which I pass on to Donnie when I see her. And most recently, everybody's noticing the front of the City Hall in the sunshine, but the foot of McBride Street and all the other areas look very good. Her and her crew do a good job every year. Is there anything further? If not, I'll quickly give the mayor's report. I met with representatives from the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia who provided a check to the City of Prince Rupert and discussed various road safety programs, also pedestrian awareness and the illegal use of cell phones while operating a motor vehicle. ICBC was one of the organizations that paid a third of the funding for the pedestrian crossing and the traffic control lights at 9th Avenue and McBride Street. I met with representatives from the University of Northern British Columbia to discuss the formation of a regional planning function and its criteria. Also in attendance were Councillors Carlick Pearson, Cunningham, and Garon. I attended a reception held by Air Liquide, who supply coastal propane here in Prince Rupert, but will be enhancing their facilities in Terrace to serve the region. A presentation about the company was provided also, and in attendance was Councillor Cunningham. I attended the Prince Rupert Airport Authority Board of Directors meeting for the month of July. The Prince Rupert Airport will be starting 2 large projects in the next few weeks. One is a $10 million runway upgrade, and the other is a $7 million upgrade, redesign, and expansion of the terminal. Councillor Garon was also in attendance. I participated in an announcement from the Provincial Secretary, Minister of Transport, regarding funding for the $10 million for the Prince Rupert Airport runway redevelopment, and thanked the Parliamentary Secretary on behalf of Prince Rupert City Council and our residents. The runway project will start in the very near future. In fact, I believe it's underway right now. Councillor Garon was also in attendance. I met with the Government of Canada, Senator Douglas Black, who was on a 2-day tour of northern British Columbia and interested in port-related opportunities at Prince Rupert. Senator Black is a member of the following Senate committees: Banking, Trade and Commerce, and Energy, the Environment, and Natural Resources. I attended a gathering hosted by the Hawk Air Aviation Corporation to acknowledge their new convenient business day direct air service, Prince Rupert to Vancouver. And this is an early morning service which will allow passengers to fly to Vancouver to do business and return to Prince Rupert that same evening. Along with a member of the Royal Canadian Police, I provided a greeting to passengers and crew from the motor vessel Regatta that visited Prince Rupert on Saturday, July 12, 2014. The vessel had 684 passengers. Many of them did take various tours. I participated in a meeting with Chief Layton of Metlakatla, Mayor Reese of L'Aquilams, and Mayor McDonald of Port Edward to discuss the Tsimshian Access Project and involvement of other interested parties. The provincial government of British Columbia is again reviewing its consideration of the project route. I toured the West Coast Connector gas transmission route off of Finlayson Island and Big Bay, as well as Tugwell Island and Digby Island to Ridley Island. Councillors Ashley and Garon also attended, and the tour was facilitated by Spectra Energy and included groups and individuals involved in the environmental assessment process for that project. I attended a portion of the West Coast Connector gas transmission meetings concerning marine habitat and species. This was a technical working group meeting At discussion were the Ellis Arm, Big Bay, and Ridley Island seabed and foreshore that the gas line will be laid upon. I participated in a meeting with representatives of the Northern Health Authority who provided an overview of their planning process for social and health impacts when considering a rapid increase in economic activity. Also discussed the environmental assessment process and the health authority's role in that. Also with their approval to the, also with their approach to the managing of the effects of an increase in activity. Councillors Ashley and Carlick Pearson were also participating. I met with representatives from the Ministry of Forests, Lands and Natural Resource Operations who were touring the region concerning development of provincial government properties in this region. At this time, until there is a commitment for a development on provincial government property, the ministry is not considering opening an office here. I attended the proposed liquefied natural gas project community information session hosted by ExxonMobil Imperial. The proposed location is the city's district lot 444. Councillors Ashley, Cunningham, Garon, and Kenny were also in attendance. And the city has an upcoming improvement plan for the Rushbrook boat launch, and that is that later this year the boat launch ramp will be reconstructed and resurfaced on the end of the ramp at the tide line, and the improvement is being made through fees collected specifically for that project. I'd like to take a moment this evening to acknowledge both Tricorp and Community Futures Development Corporation, Pacific Northwest. These two long-standing organizations in the city, and they are made up of staff members and board members who are certainly community-minded and regionally focused. There has been an increase in business startups, and it is through support of these organizations that local people have been able to find opportunities. Both Tricorp and Community Futures are doing work that has a positive effect on the greater community. That concludes my report. If there's nothing further, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Cunningham? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Ashley. Any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. This meeting stands adjourned.